Who's that tall, dark stranger there coming out of the Yonkers train station? He knows Yonkers. He knows Albany. He knows the world. He scoops all media. He predicted Janet DeFiore, Westchester DA, would be nominated for Chief Justice of the Court of Appeals in New York, and he was right. He created the news website, the Yonkers Tribune. He's an immigrant to the United States, fluent in several languages, including politicians speak. He asks the kind of questions that need to be asked. He comforts the afflicted and afflicts the comfortable. He's been editor for 17 years of the Yonkers Tribune. He knows news. You'll meet him tonight on People to be Heard. Good evening. I'm John Bailey. This is People to be Heard, the program where people who have something to say have their say. Tonight, you've got Hezi Aris, editor and founder of the Yonkers Tribune and the YonkersTribune.com. And we are doing this because Hezi is celebrating his 17th consecutive year of the Yonkers Tribune. Hezi, welcome to the program. We've known each other about 12, 14 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we do a Around the World radio program on Hezi's radio show on Blog Radio, which is
the Blog Radio.
Westchester on the level. Or the world on the level, right?
We do that. We cross borders.
Yeah, that's true. So anyway, you founded the Yonkers Tribune in 1999 as a website. And prior to that, you were an immigrant from Israel, and you became a naturalized citizen. And basically, that's where you learned to become a citizen of the world. So, what did you do before Yonkers Tribune?
Well, I was a biochemist by trade, and then I suffered my heart attacks, and then I had to calm down a bit, and then so I picked up probably the most difficult thing in the world, which is to report. Especially when you have, like, you're reporting
an anxiety-ridden profession.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So it was a real problem. But I love to write, and I'd never written really, and so it took me a while.
You've never written?
I never wrote before.
Wow.
But I love to write, and I want to
write
get
better than
ideas.
most of the journalists that write today.
Well, that's very kind of you.
Yeah.
But it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. I like the people in Yonkers, because I had not known about them. And you know how I got started? You're not going to believe this.
No.
You remember there was a newspaper out in New Rochelle, based out of New Rochelle, with a guy by the name of Brody. He had like 5 newspapers, and I found a job after my first heart attack, and my girlfriend said, hey, there's a job up in New Rochelle. And so I looked into it. There was a Yonkers paper, and that Yonkers paper hired me for advertising. So I did really well.
I see. So you just got in on the business side of publishing.
And then it turned out somebody must have been watching over my head, because I wasn't all of that, self-managing. And it turned out I wanted to look at the paper, and I said to myself, I can write these articles. Let me write something.
I can do that.
I gave it to the boss. He loved it. He said, keep on writing. So I wrote for 3 weeks, and then that was the boss that was there. But the real boss, Mr. Brady, he hadn't come back from vacation. When he did, everything hit the fan, and they said, we don't want you to write, we just want you to sell advertising.
I see.
But I ended up going to Yonkers, because that was where I was covering. I opened up the paper, the Yonkers Tribune, and never looked back.
I see. Now, the fact is that the Yonkers Tribune, you started out, what was your attitude toward it? It was idealistic like mine. When I started White Plains Citizen and Reporter, I just felt, gee, there isn't really too much coverage of White Plains in the paper. So, hey, maybe I can do a website and they might hire me.
That was just like me. I was going to go in. I figured I liked the city. I liked the people. I got to know some of the business people as well. And I figured this is a wonderful opportunity to celebrate Yonkers. And then I got into it. And then I started to find out that there was actually government in this city. And
do you still feel there's government?
No. Now I've come to know that there isn't any.
Yonkers Tribune's Hezi Aris, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, so that was the thing that was so great about it. I loved the city, and I started to celebrate it. did my first really big article was talking about the pier not far from here, and they had music there, and I loved it. That came out to be really well respected as an article, and then ended up starting to get into the government, and then I followed it because I found it exciting.
Oh yes, very exciting if you
Always.
can find where the excitement is.
Well, that
Yes,
took a while.
Right.
So it was growing for me, a lot of growing for me, and I loved it. But if you do the job well as you do, then you get a love for the coverage, and I found it exciting to see how government functions, how people were part of the process, and how people were not part of the process.
Right, and how they only let you know what they want you to know.
I found that to be the case too. That was upsetting.
Did that disillusion you? Because it disillusioned me. You always felt that people in government, I did anyway, people in government were working for the public good, were interested in doing the best. And this rapidly, I realized, was certainly not the case.
Well, your concepts were my concepts.
Yeah.
So we seem to have gone on the same road and came to the same conclusion, and then eventually it deteriorated for me. And I said, this is not working. I couldn't understand it.
Yes, now, I
Then it
guess
became
you
adversarial.
experienced the same shutout experience that I receive every
Absolutely.
week.
Absolutely.
I don't even bother calling City Hall
Yeah.
to ask a question for clarification because I know they won't call me back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I made a phone call today to Yonkers City Hall.
Yeah.
3 phone calls, not 1 call was returned.
Not one. It was a
No,
rather
no.
important case that they should take a
You would think.
stand on because it involves their own personnel.
You would think,
Yes.
but the thing that's fascinating is they're more interested in doing what they're doing, and I'm not important to them. So even though everybody read the article, it didn't matter.
Right. Well, that's another thing. How people will not admit to even the blogs, quote unquote, a most derogatory term, which was invented by the print press to make light of what we do and and websites in general. That's what they did.
But you know what's interesting, John? Today, even though the blog term, which was
Yeah.
derogatory, it became an epithet, a 4-letter word.
Yes.
And it turned out that didn't detract people from maintaining their passion and reporting locally.
Yes.
And isn't it interesting that today the hyper-local market is the most important? And the only ones that are doing the job are people like you, and people like me, and everyone to their strengths. But the point is, it's an integral part of our society today.
Yeah. Well, how do you judge journalism today as exists in our metro area? I'm really concerned about it.
I'm concerned about it too. At one time, I was happy when the Journal News was light on their, and weren't able to do as well as I thought, because I figured that would give us another opportunity, and I realized that was really wrong. The more competition there is, the more coverage of any subject matter
Absolutely.
gives us a better ability to conceptualize what went wrong, what went right. So, so we get honed by our competition to a great extent too.
Yes, like for example, there was a story today about a restoration of a very high-paying job which has not been in existence for 12 years.
Really?
And the Journal News had the story, and I did not. However, the reason was I didn't read the innocuous line in the consent agenda. You have to see what's in the consent behind these innocuous little things that seem very routine, but sometimes hide something that they never discuss in public.
Never.
And never even discuss the pros and cons of, and all of a sudden, boom, it's just there.
Well, it's a different form of English. It's not one that we learned in school. Because we learn one English, then there's Shakespearean English, there's the mother tongue and the Australian tongue,
And then there's the transparent English.
Transparent, yeah, you bet.
Yes, transparent.
It's unbelievable.
Perhaps one of the most overworked words today.
Absolutely,
Transparency.
we should translate that to something else.
That means you will not know what is going on in our administration.
That's right.
Yes.
It's a hard road to hoe, as they say.
Right. Well, but you had the scoop of the year in picking Janet DiFiore as the Cuomo's pick for the appellate court.
Right.
And
Nobody even considered that, but you were right, and of course they never gave you any.
Well, you know what it is?
Yeah.
It's really not, it's not my conceptualization. There are people who really do travel within the circles of power. I don't travel those routes, but you and I both, I guess we nurture relationships, or other people who nurture relationships with us. So when you get to know people and they trust you,
Yeah.
and they can say, well, off the record, they know it can be trusted as off the record,
Yes.
and that it's going to stay with you
Absolutely.
and die
You
with
can
you.
never betray a source.
Never. Oh,
Never.
God
No.
forbid.
When you do that, it's over.
Yeah.
Nobody will ever trust
So
you.
my source was phenomenal,
Yes.
and I've been able to trust that source for years, and so it was wonderful.
Yes. So when Hezi speaks, people should listen.
Oh, yeah, well,
Yes, right.
but I should only own a
No.
brokerage firm, which I don't.
Absolutely. Now, coming full cycle now, you've run the Tribune for 17 years. And at this point, where do you see this going? It's sort of like you just can't stop it, you know?
I can't stop it. I want to continue
Yes,
it.
right.
I think in the last year I've realized the importance of it. More
Absolutely.
so than ever before. And you know what did it? Actually, it wasn't because I realized, hey, this is a great product. I always thought that I wrote a good product. May not be exceptional every
Well,
day.
you know you're good when you're good.
Yeah.
You know you're good when you're good. I
Well,
mean, it's a truism.
It is a truism,
Yeah,
but you know,
yeah.
some people said to me, you know, Hezi, you're getting older. You know, I am getting older. I don't know about you, John, but I'm getting older. And it turns out they said, well, do you have anybody to take over the operation?
Well,
Now,
that's a problem we both face.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was phenomenal. When I heard that, I said, you know, they're right, because maybe we can continue without me when it's time for me to go to the pasture.
Well, I don't think real reporters ever go out to the pasture.
We fade away.
Oh, there may be reporters on the job that have been grazing a long time, but you know, it's just really terrible. I mean, there are a lot of good reporters in Westchester, where there were, but they've changed.
Well, you know what it is? I've always recognized that there are some exceptionally good people on the job, no matter which media you look at. The difference is that quite often certain media have an agenda based on their personal editorial staff
And
direction
connections.
and connections.
Right.
So they,
Establishmentarianism.
you got it.
Yeah.
And so they actually they become malleable because of their advertisers and so on.
Right.
And direction.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, looking back on it now, thinking that Journal News would ever hire me, I said, boy, that was a pipe dream.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
true.
I couldn't work for the way they report on the stories. I couldn't
Yeah.
work in that atmosphere. You got to report what really happened. You got to ask the tough question.
A lot of people don't want to hear those tough
That's
questions
right.
because
No,
they don't want to
certainly
answer
not.
them.
So, but you are no stranger asking the tough question.
Well, I
I
love
always
it.
admire your courage.
I love it.
You know, it's like as that old Cary Grant line in the Mr. Lucky movie. Didn't you see an elephant with muddy feet
Yeah,
just
yeah,
walk
right.
across the
Yeah, that's
table?
good.
Like that?
That's
That's
good.
right. That's what a tough question does.
Yeah.
There's a hush. It's the press conference.
Yes, it does.
Yes, they don't like it, and they say, "Well, that's a very good question. That was done to me yesterday. That was so funny." But anyway, what is your observation about? As we were talking journalism today, you mentioned that you think it's dangerous the way journalism has gone about. Why?
I think because what we've done is we've made it a non-productive mode of employment, because people who are in it, very rarely do they earn, you know, the six figures that they used to. It's hard to manage and create a life, and a life today is not just for yourself, but you need to employ or get enough money so that you can have a family if that's what you want. But most people do want a family, And you can't afford to do that on $50,000 a year in New York.
No.
And the value of reporting has been diminished to such an extent. And even the schools that teach it are so expensive. So if you go to Columbia, you know, that's wonderful, but where are you going to get a job to pay off the loans? So we are creating a system that is dysfunctional throughout.
Yes, and the journalism schools are populated by relics of the past.
That's true too. And they haven't caught up to today.
I hate to say that, but I'm not a good Twitter because I've always felt
Right.
shooting from the mouth on Twitter gets you in trouble.
Right.
And, you know, I don't like relying on Twitter either because rumors are just put out. Now, it's good for eyewitness events. You know, hey, look, there's a flood down here. And that's really what it's good for.
Well, you know, in the hyperlocal market, or even on the national market or the international, I don't know how much Twitter really assists in the process. I think it's more important, especially in the hyperlocal market. We've got to know each other. You can't just take a rumor. You know that's what it is. It's just a rumor. It's
rumor
only
mill.
144 letters to substantiate an issue.
No,
It doesn't
no
work.
way.
So how do you reach them? You know, you say, well, please call me back. They'll call you, or they won't call you.
Yeah.
So you need an answer. You need somebody at the other side to be responsive.
Okay, and just in case you don't recognize the distinguished gentleman on my left, it's Hezi Aris, the editor of the notorious Yonkers Tribune, which nobody admits to reading, but everybody reads. And he has ran the Yonkers Tribune since 1999, starting as a website, and
Then we went to print a little bit.
went to print, and we're discussing the state of journalism today. Now, I'd like to turn the focus, because since we both sort of cover the county too in a oblique, backhanded way that affects our communities, what do you think of the county's position right now, Westchester County's position as we enter a new year?
Well, that's an interesting question because there's so much politics that goes with it. I'm wondering if Rob Astorino, the county executive, will continue in office if he'll run again in 2 years. I'm wondering if the win for Mayor Mike Spano in Yonkers is going to embolden him to the point where he'll consider running for county executive. But I also hear that there are other people who are interested in county executive
Well, you
position.
got to think about Tom Roach, the
Absolutely.
Teflon mayor.
Yes.
And that's the White Plains Mayor, Tom Roach. And he seems to be adopting the town meeting kind of process. The only time he appears in public is at neighborhood association things, and the occasional opening, and he smiles a lot, and he just inspires liking and trust and all that. It's a real talent.
It is a talent.
And this is what wins elections. Now, Bramson used to be able to do that, but he just got totally tangled up in the tax blues.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Astorino didn't win because Bramson was so weak. He won because he cut taxes.
That's true, and that's the question
Bramson
now.
did not, and he never answered that conflict directly.
Very
But
true.
now, going ahead, we have the county refusing to judge its numbers right, don't you think?
I think so too. And that's really become a problem because it's a numbers game, but this is a game being played to manage the political agenda. It's despite almost the public interest. So that if the public is unaware of what the numbers are, they don't realize that we're funding the deficits. What's that going to do to the city? I don't know.
Well,
And the county.
and number one, I mean, you can't budget 5% more sales tax receipts, which they just did at the end of 2016, when there's no evidence to support that you can get more than 2%.
Well, you know what I don't understand? Remember, we discussed this once on one of the radio programs.
Yeah.
The cost of fuel, of oil, went down to like $35 a barrel.
Yeah.
That means we used to get always a percentage of the cost of the gallon. So for every gallon you bought, a percentage of that went to the county.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we were paying $140 a barrel,
Yeah.
we got that same percentage.
Yeah.
Now at 35, we're getting the same percentage. That means we're getting less money.
Yeah, but
so how come we don't
But
legislate
it's only
something?
2% down. It was only about like 2% down. That's not much. It
No.
can't be the oil prices. It
It
just
isn't.
can't be. People were driving less.
That's true.
If they were driving, well, anyway, I don't want to get involved
But
in that.
in Long Island,
Yeah.
they put on a flat rate. So if it's 50 cents a gallon, that's what you pay.
Yeah.
Whether the barrel is 35 or whether the barrel is 75. And that's what we need to do. That's where the creativity is, which is functional.
Creativity from an elected official.
Yes.
Please God.
Yeah.
Yes,
Please
right.
God.
Yes,
I
please
should
God.
drink to that.
Because there is none.
No.
I mean, they can't even stand on their own principles. In fact, let's take a national scope here.
Mhm.
What do we have here? We have a nation that is enjoying what I call the campaign of infamy.
Yeah.
I mean, I have never seen such disrespect towards people who live in the country, who have jobs in this country, and such downright cruelty about immigrants that want to come in this country because they've got killers on their tails, and America continues, at least the political people, don't they continue to ignore people at help who need help unless it is politically advantageous to do so.
Well, we somehow lost our way,
We-
not only in the United States, but also in Europe. So I don't know what it was. We reached a point of dysfunction all the way from the 1800s for sure into the 1900s, into World War I and World War II. I thought that things had changed for the better when the Berlin Wall came down. You would have expected a rapprochement, a sense of friendship. But now, even though the wall is not part of the imprint, it's still there mentally.
We
It's
have
been
Mr.
resurrected.
Putin rolling back the past to
Yeah.
create
But we're
another
part of that
mighty Russia.
partnership, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We are creating the old sphere of influence in the Middle East.
But I-
Russia has this,
Yeah.
we have that, and
The problem is, I guess, the systems are broken all over the world, where we have the few that have been elected to office who run. They're our daddies, they're our sugar daddies, and they're also the father knows best of the world. They tell us the way it's going to go down. And the rest of us, whether it be newspapers or regular people at home who have a regular job, we're dismissed. And that game is over. That's where the anger is.
yeah, and there's really no difference between the two parties, because you've got the
No.
Democrats who sold their president down the river on many issues when it
Yes.
became politically expedient to do so,
Yes.
and to save their own seats.
Well, that's what's become open to people's minds.
Yes.
They realize that this is all it is. Can you imagine if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you dismiss your own constituents? How can you do that? Makes no sense.
Dismissing the mistreatment of women and men in the military, a horrendous
How long does that have to take? What is it?
Yeah.
What is
Throw
it
them
that?
out.
Where's the disconnect?
Throw them out.
Well, that's the problem. You see,
Not the
we-
politicians. I mean, people do wrong in the military.
Throw 'em out.
There's no need for a sense of justice.
No.
You just out them.
Yeah.
Well, Hezi Aris, editor of the Yonkers Tribune, and the website is,
YonkersTribune.com.
right, easy to remember, you'll never forget it. And Hezi, you've been our guest, you have been heard, and you will be heard again in the radio blog show 5 days a week. Where is that?
That's on the internet.
Yes.
And it's on Blog Talk Radio, and it's called Westchester on the Level.
Right, and he has all sorts of news personalities and interviews coming on that show.
And do you know what John Bailey? He's with the White Plains Citizen-Net Reporter. He comes on
Yeah,
the
I
show.
work with him.
Yeah, you work for him.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
he's
yeah.
on the show every Monday at 10 o'clock.
Yes, it's a talk show that Rush Limbaugh just listens in his other ear.
Well, he won't give us credit, but
That's
I know
right.
he's listening.
So anyway, Hezi Aris, You have been heard.
A pleasure. Thank you so
Right.
much.
And John Bailey, good night for People to Be Heard.